Good morning. It is awesome to be here. One side tangent as Annie makes that introduction. Let me just share with you an experience that I had. I don't know. It was more than 20 years ago. I was trying to push the whole topic of discipleship into the Catholic world. And I wasn't alone. There was a lot of voices in this, but I was at a national catechetical leaders meeting. And Dr. Bob Rice from Franciscan University was there with me, and we kept trying to talk about discipleship and what it looks like to disciple teenagers. And there was everyone at this meeting. There was only like 50 people there, but every single person was like a national organizational leader or publisher or bishop or a priest or something like this. And at a certain point, I had been up at the microphone probably 4 or 5 times. Bob Rice had been up there several times, and we keep using the term disciple. And then all of a sudden, this religious sister gets up and says, I am requesting that the term disciple and discipleship not be used anymore for the rest of this meeting. You cannot define it. It's a Protestant term. It's not what we do in the Catholic Church. We catechize. And we were not allowed to say disciple after that at this meeting. Okay, look how far we've come. Isn't this awesome? How things have changed. So, I'm really excited to be here. I kind of have 2 realities going on this morning. One, just backdrop, I just went on a cruise with my wife. We got back up a little over a week ago, came home to Memorial Day weekend. My son was graduating from high school the next Tuesday. We had a huge graduation party. Our 5th kid graduated from high school. We've made it, I think, So very, very, lots of exciting family stuff going on. On the cruise, we I don't know, 8, 9, 10 months ago, we threw out there we're going on the cruise to celebrate our 30th anniversary. And so we threw out to some friends who have been a part of our life the entire time. We've been friends with them either before we were married or all within the first year. 4 couples that just have been a part of our journey. And, no pressure. But man, it would be really cool. You guys have been a part of our lives, our whole marriage, basically. And wouldn't it be fun to be on a cruise together? No pressure, All 4 of them said yes. So we literally ended up on this cruise with these 4 other couples that have just been a part of our life for 30 years or more. And so it's pretty awesome. The other day, I was walking around in a Hawaiian shirt and these shoes, my Hey Dude shoes. And my wife jokes and says, are you trying to pretend that you're still on the cruise? And I said, Meg, I'm going to be pretending that for the entire summer, okay? So that's one reality. It's I'm just still in cruise mode. I'm kind of imagine everywhere that I go, there's some type of a food bar where I can grab whatever I want to eat and then go sit by the pool deck, right? So that's one backdrop. The other, though, is I'm pretty tired. My first flight yesterday got delayed 7 times. I finally realized I don't think this flight's actually going to take off. So I got myself onto a different flight that left later. That flight then got delayed 3 times. So I don't know what was going on yesterday, but I showed up here about 1 a.m. Poor Jason, my bunking buddy. I'm sure I woke you up in the middle of the night. So that's my background. Reality for where I'm at this morning. So if I'm a little delirious, it's only because I didn't get enough sleep. So here's how I want to start, though. I want you to imagine something. If you need to close your eyes to do that. But I want you to imagine yourself 5 years ago. Early June of 2020. Think back. Where were you? Who were you? My guess is you're not the same person today that you were 5 years ago. If you need a little help, here's what was going on 5 years ago. We were just on, but not even really in many places in the country, not even on the other side of the lockdown. Where I was in Oklahoma City, we had not returned to Mass. It wasn't until the Feast of Pentecost that we actually welcomed people to come back to church, which was later in June that year. The George Floyd thing had happened here. Like we're literally at ground zero for that, right? All of the BLM movement that kind of emerged on the other side of that, and the riots. Do you remember this? Do you remember June of 2020? Like how crazy and how chaotic it was. But also how confusing it was. We literally were getting messages every day about social distancing and wearing masks and how dangerous this is and how bad the crisis is going to be. But then the very next news story are literally thousands and thousands of people not wearing masks in a riot, burning things and blowing stuff up. And like the messages, everything around us, I don't know, I just remember that time being so confusing, so chaotic. And I don't know, something in me kept saying, I don't think we're getting the whole story here. Something isn't making sense with this. We're being told one thing, but you can see other things playing out in a way that it doesn't match up with what you're being told, right? This was epic. Landmark, you could say. I think kind of mass confusion and mass chaos. What happened in 2020, and I don't know what your experience was as everything unfolded, but 2021 was worse for me than 2020. Like the onset of the pandemic and all of the stuff, that was jarring, it was confusing, but it was actually the next year as everybody attempted to try and recover some stability, where things got forced and weird and strange and policy-driven and rule-driven, and everybody, so to me, 2021 was actually worse. But this was a traumatic event. I don't think most people actually realize that it was a traumatic event. And when you go through something like that, like your body reacts, your experience of life shifts. You suffer PTSD, you could say, right? Quick side tangent. I just want to help us understand a little bit of the psychology of this. Okay, I'm throwing up on the board here how a counselor might talk about the evolution and resolution of a crisis. Like what happens to us, okay? What's crazy is everybody went through this. Every single one of us went through this. Everybody on the planet went through this. And this is one of the dangers of this, because when everybody has gone through something, the benchmark for reality actually changes. Does that make sense? Like you actually may be tempted to think, I didn't really go through this because everybody went through it. So it's kind of like the norm for the entire population. And so you're not asking questions about, how did this impact me? How did this change me, right? So look how here's how a crisis develops and how it resolves itself. And I'm not going to drill too deep into this. I just want to give you kind of like a high-level visual of it. So you have, kind of emotional instability. Can anyone relate to that back in 2020? Like I was emotionally very unstable. Uh, and there's a precipitating event. So in other words, there's something, when the instability happens, there's something that happens. It could be small, like if you're already emotionally unstable, it doesn't take a lot to actually be a precipitating event. Does that make sense? But throw the kinds of things that were happening in 2020 and 2021 in the mix, and here you are, right? There's a failure to cope. So you start experiencing yourself floundering and declining and trying to cope with what's going on around you, right? Maybe it's easier to think about this in reference to the teens that you serve, because every single one of us have seen this happen in the lives of young people, right? Where they're not coping, they start making bad choices, they start turning to other things, they're trying to regain stability, but it's failing. And at some point there's a critical juncture. You decline so far and you hit a certain place where you actually are wrestling with, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. So something critical has to happen right there in that spot where you either turn and get help or you continue to decline. If you continue to decline, it can get pretty dark and pretty ugly pretty quickly, right? You can go into suicidal ambivalence and back and forth with wanting to live and wanting to not be here, and there's stages to that process, all of that, right? I don't know about you, but has anyone actually experienced an increase in suicide in the last couple of years in your life? I've had 7. 7 friends. And a couple of them, I would have never seen it coming. They were Christians. They were leaders. They were the kind of people that I looked up to. So this is real. This is a real thing, and it's still going on right now. If you make the choice to reach for help, you actually can start to get better. And this is what's really important, I think. Look at the different possibilities on the getting better side. You can return to normal. So look at the levels. If you look straight across the dotted line, like the return to normal is you kind of regain your former stability. You kind of get back to yourself on the other side. But the other possibilities are you could maladapt, which means you actually become less than what you were before. Frequently, that's you turn to something that helps you cope. Like, for example, how many young people on the other side of the pandemic had an addiction? Well, when every major porn site opened up during the lockdown, did you know this? That the 7 major porn sites completely gave open borders to their websites during the lockdown. How diabolical is that? How many people got on the other side of the pandemic and actually became less of themselves? The other possibility, though, is you could actually adapt. You could be what I would call resilient. You get on the other side, and it actually made you better. It made you stronger. I wrote an article during the pandemic. Don't let this pandemic go to waste. Don't let all this suffering go to waste. This could actually make us better. It can make us stronger. So I'm throwing all of this up there for us because I'm trying to ask you to imagine going back 5 years. The ministry that I work with now, today, is called Impact Center. Our whole reason for existing is to minister to people like you. So I'm doing a side tangent in this talk, kind of going to what I do day to day, of just asking this question. How did you fare the crisis? Because there really was a global crisis. I'm convinced that every single one of us are suffering and could still be suffering from PTSD from what we went through. And yes, we're here to talk about teenagers. We're here to talk about what discipleship looks like. But put your own air mask on before you help those you're traveling with. On the other side of this, where do you find yourself? Are you back to yourself? Are you better? Did you maladapt through the crisis? Where do you find yourself 5 years later? So I don't want to just throw that question out there and pass it by. I want to stop for a second. You know how where you're walking along and you see somebody and it's like, hey, how you doing? But you really don't want an answer to that question? And sometimes you're annoyed, actually, if the person really answers. I didn't have time for your answer. I was just being polite. That's not the way I'm asking right now. How are you doing? No, really. I really mean it. How are you doing? Just sit with that for a minute. Lord, we invite you here this morning. Holy Spirit, we welcome you here. Lord, I pray that you would bring your light, your illumination for us, that you would allow us the gift of looking within, not by ourselves in a way that could overwhelm us or discourage us, but looking within actually with you, being curious about our own well-being. Help us see, Lord, where we need to turn to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So here would be my encouragement to us. I know that's kind of a heavy way to start, but my encouragement would be this just fundamental truth. In the world you will have trouble, but take heart. I've overcome the world. You know, a lot of times we can think about what we've gone through, and particularly if you go back into the heat of all of that stuff, and you could be kind of overwhelmed with what happened. You know, my encouragement would be, okay, we've gone through things like this before. Actually, much, much worse. Like if you go back to some of the plagues that were kind of the galvanizing effect for Catholicism, like the Catholic faith grew by leaps and bounds during those times. They sometimes lasted 17, 20 years, and millions and like half of the population died during them, right? So we've gone through things like this before, and Jesus throughout all of history is constantly saying to us, in the world, you're going to have trouble. There's going to be things like this that are going to happen, but take heart. I've overcome the world. Which is a great encouragement to us, okay? So, one jarring thing that I want to just bring to our recognition this morning, because we're going to shift now to talk about, okay, how did all of that stuff over the last 5 years change the way ministry looks? How did it change us, but how did it change the young people that we're working with? How did it change the landscape for ministry in a typical parish in our country? How is ministry different than what it was 5 years ago? How are teens different than they were 5 years ago? One interesting reflection. I was at the NFCYM National Youth Ministry Gathering in January that they held in Atlanta this year, back in it was either like late January, early February. From the main stage, 2 statistics were thrown out. 25% of diocesan offices for youth ministry have been eliminated in the last 5 years. 35% of parish youth ministry positions have been eliminated or merged with other roles in the last 5 years. Sorry, but holy crap, is that really true? Okay, I'm an oldie here. I've been doing this for lots of years. 30 years ago, they said, like one of the statistics that were thrown out there were that there was only paid youth ministry happening in about 15% of the parishes. And I would like to believe, I don't know if it's true, but I would like to believe that I had something to do with increasing that number over the 35 years or whatever I've been doing what I'm doing. I watched as the number increased. And at one point, we were saying that we had paid youth ministers in over 40% of the parishes in this country. Guess what that number is today? According to YDisciple and Franciscan University research. These aren't formal studies, right? 17. Well, I don't know about you, but I kind of find myself a little beleaguered. working on the front of youth ministry for decades and making progress, getting more and more parishes buying in and making an investment and getting somebody hired and equipping and empowering them to minister to their teenagers. And then in the last 3 to 5 years, to lose all of that progress? Holy smoke. Now, mind you, what also has happened in the last 5 years? The greatest emotional and mental health crisis in history, modern history. So, I mean, just interpret that. During the greatest emotional and mental health crisis for young people in modern history, the response of the Catholic Church has been to diminish parish youth ministry by 35% and to diminish diocesan youth ministry by 25%. Here's where we find ourselves today. Kind of the landscape of reality, right? So, what does a vision for discipleship look like in the midst of all of that? So this is the task this morning. And in some ways, I guess I want to start out by saying, okay, I don't think I have all of the answers. But I think in a room like this, we've got a lot of people that have been forging on this front. And so I guess I would want to kind of shift a little bit from me just giving a talk to me leading us in a conversation. I want to ask us some hard questions, but I don't think this will go as well if you don't engage and really participate in a conversation here around this, right? So I think I can give us some principles and I think even some things that can benchmark us. But part of the reality is we're in a new landscape. Like, you can't go through what we went through over the last 5 years without it being a completely different reality in front of us, right? Anyone ever heard of the book Canoeing the Mountains? Okay, I don't really recommend it. Google it and get the summary, cliff notes. And here's why I wouldn't recommend it. It's written by an evangelical pastor, mega church pastor, and the first third of the book is amazing. He uses an analogy that's just really, really, I think, poignant for us. Kind of Christendom to Apostolic Mission, if you've heard of that book by Monsignor Shea. It's the same kind of principle. Like, he's recognizing, okay, tidal wave shift here in what's happening in the church, you know. But he uses a completely different analogy, which I'll share for us, right? But after the first third of him creating the whole analogy and talking about the reality of where we are, he shifts into very evangelical megachurch mode. And so the rest of the book is just largely irrelevant, I think, you know, to what we would be seeing in a Catholic context. So that's why I wouldn't recommend go spend your money on the book. You can get the first third kind of in a summary online. But here's what he does in the first third of the book. He likens where we're at right now to the Lewis and Clark expedition. So back when Lewis and Clark were commissioned by the president to go and explore the Louisiana Territory, which they were trying to decide whether or not they were going to purchase. But the president didn't know what it was and needed somebody to explore and come back with information to help inform the decision. Lewis and Clark went on the expedition with this mindset. Everything that we've known for over 100 years would lead us to believe, even the current maps of the time, would lead us to believe that if we could just get up to the top of the Continental Divide, we would just coast down the other side to the Pacific Ocean. What were all of the maps of that time missing? The Rocky Mountains. They got up to the top of the Continental Divide, hiking, carrying their canoes, some canoeing, but thinking they were just going to canoe down the other side. And what did they find when they got up there? One mountain range after another as far as the eye could see. Hence the title of the book, Canoeing the Mountains. What Lewis and Clark had to do was completely recalibrate. They had to ditch their canoes and shift to mountain climbing. but they didn't have the right supplies. They didn't have the right gear. They didn't have enough food and supplies for the amount of time that it was going to take them. Now, he likens that to where we are right now. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? Do you sometimes feel like you got up to the top of the Continental Divide thinking, okay, finally, I hit the precipice, and now I can kind of like coast a little bit. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I don't even have a map for what's in front of me. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand why the teens aren't responding the way that I thought they would. They're not coming to things. They're not engaging. I can't seem to get their attention, right? I think this is the reality. And that's why I would say I don't have any illusions that I have a lot of the answers to this. But I do think I can hold up for us a basic fundamental principle, what I would call nova et vetera. New and old. When I was teaching at the Augustine Institute for almost a decade, we actually started participating in this theological journal. It was in Europe, but we helped with the first English translation of this theological journal in the United States in English-speaking countries. But the title of the journal was Nova et Vetera, new and old. And the whole principle, like Augustine has his famous line, the ancient and the new. Ever ancient, ever new. So like the whole principle of this is recognizing that, yes, things are constantly changing, things are constantly new, but we're actually rooted in what we know. We're rooted in the old. We're rooted in the ancient. Unfortunately, we're living in a world that wants to kind of deconstruct all of the ancient. It wants to detach us from all of the things that we've learned over time. I mean, the principle is free us up to think. Free us up to explore, right? I'm sorry, that's just stupid. Detaching yourself from everything that you've learned doesn't actually free you. It hinders you, right? Case in point, look at gender ideology today, right? We've got adults, grown adults, listening to 8 and 9-year-old kids and confused and having no idea how to respond to what they think about themselves. And what's the solution? Let them choose. That's what it looks like to detach yourself from everything that you've learned. You have no basis for reality, no basis for making any decisions. So, fundamental principle, how do we get a vision for discipleship in the kind of times that we're in right now? Old, we hold on to the old, and we embrace the new reality without succumbing to it. What does that look like? So let's jump into this, okay? First, I want to just talk a little bit about what is the new. What's the new stuff that we're facing? And I know this isn't going to be a comprehensive list. So at a certain point I want to ask, do you have anything you would add to this? But what are the ever-shifting, changing, tumultuous things happening in the culture, but they're kind of new over the last 5 years even, and they're having an impact on the young people that we serve, I would say in a way that is literally changing them, right? So one is just the impact of technology, smartphones, social media, AI. Like these things they're just fundamentally rewiring kids' brains in a way that most of us actually can't relate to. Even if you're younger, if you're in your mid to late 20s, I think you're going to have a hard time understanding a current 16, 17-year-old because this stuff is changing so fast, right? Maybe you use AI more than I do. Have you seen these commercials out recently about how, some adults are still using Chat GPT? That's me. That's all I've ever used. I don't know. I really don't know anything else about AI, But I met a young person, just in his early 20s, who is going through kind of a train wreck reality right now because for almost 6 months, he started talking to AI on his phone about how to navigate his relationship with his girlfriend. Every single day, what should I say? How should I talk to her? And AI literally navigated the entire relationship. He did exactly what AI told him to do. And it was a disaster, right? So we have young people literally that are relying on AI for everything, every decision that they're making. Think about how much that changed reality. Are you guys familiar with Jonathan Haidt? He came out with a book this past year, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, called The Anxious Generation. Okay, one of his earlier books was The Coddling of the American Mind. If you have not read The Coddling of the American Mind, you need to go buy a copy of it before you go home from this conference. It is phenomenal. I was so moved by that book that the year that I read it, I bought a copy for all 5 of my children and gave it to them for a Christmas present. And then over the next couple of months, made them read it and talk to them about it. The anxious generation, though, starts to get into some of this kind of reality. So he's trying to help us understand how smartphones and technology have rewired the brains of kids. And this is the fundamental. So this is clear at the beginning of the book in the introduction, but he's kind of trying to bring up for us the difference between the real world and the virtual world. What he's talking about are social interactions. So for millions of years, what we relied on as human beings for social interactions were people are embodied. They have bodies. We use our bodies to communicate. We're conscious of the bodies of others. We respond to the bodies of others, both consciously and unconsciously. Relationships, relational interactions are synchronous. They're happening at the same time with subtle cues about timing and turn-taking. Social interactions involve primarily one-to-one or one-to-several communication, with only one interaction happening at a given time. They take place within communities that have a high bar for entry and a high bar for exit. So people are strongly motivated to invest in relationships and repair rifts when they happen. So this is the reality as human beings that we've known for millions of years. And then all of a sudden, look what it's become. Just a few decades now, and I would say markedly in the last 5 years. Social interactions are disembodied. You don't need a body. Just language. Partners could be and already are artificial intelligence. Social interactions are heavily asynchronous, meaning it's not happening at the same time. It's text-based posts and comments. A video call would be different, but I would argue most young people, particularly Gen Alpha, they're not doing they're not doing video calls. It's almost incredibly difficult to get them on a phone call, period, right? Social interactions involve a substantial number of one-to-many communications. Broadcasting sometimes to a potentially vast audience, 1 to thousands. They take place within communities that have a low bar for entry and a low bar for exit. People can block others or just quit when they're not pleased. Communities tend to be short-lived and relationships are often disposable. You know, one of the growing trends, I just read an article about this about a week ago, but one of the growing trends happening even in church communities are young people who are completely disavowing their parents. And many, many times the parents aren't even told why. They just stop responding, they cut them out of their life. And it's happening, you know, it's social influencers, it's counselors, it's all kinds of people that are encouraging this kind of reality where if there's somebody that's toxic in your life, you need to cut out all toxic. And relationships are disposable, even if it's your parents. Eroding institutional trust, loss of faith. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Josh Packard. What's the name of his organization? Springtide. They just have some great stuff. One of the interesting things that he's discovering, though, is the eroding institutional trust. 49% of affiliated young Catholics, 49% of them have little to no trust in organized religion. "24% of the young people who report that they are affiliated with Roman Catholicism, but they're not, however, religious people." Nearly 1/3 of affiliated young Catholics told us that they do not think it's important to have a faith community. 34% of Catholic young people attend religious service once a year or less. Look at the impact of the pandemic on faith. Young people in general, 47% no change, but young Catholics, only 40. I'm having trouble reading my own slide. What does that say, 43? 42. I mean, look on the young Catholic side, you know, it's well over half. Faith has become stronger, doubt their faith more, or lost faith completely. So we have, again, this new reality, right? I think the gender ideology and fluid sexuality movements that are happening is another huge, huge thing. Pay attention to the script that is being played out, right? Like the strategy to make homosexual and lesbian lifestyle, like gay and lesbian marriage, the strategy, I don't know if you've ever seen some of the research on this, but there literally was a manuscript written that gave the playbook for how to do this in the United States. Have you ever seen this? How long did it take? It was over 25 years. How long did it take for the gender ideology movement to surge? It's like 5 years. But what's fascinating is they're using the exact same script. They're just doing it at hyperspeed. They literally are doing the exact same strategy that was used to make gay and lesbian marriage a widespread accepted reality in our country. This is what young people are dealing with. And I think one of the things that it leads to is a loss. I'm using a word that's probably not a word. A loss of humanality. We're losing our own understanding of what it means to be human. What else would you add to this list? When we talk about the new, the challenges, the things that are literally changing the face of reality, particularly for the kids that we serve, what am I missing? Yeah, mental health and emotional needs, anxiety, depression. This Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, he believes it's largely because of the smartphone, that's leading to a lot of this kind of anxiety and depression. Yep. Gaming is huge, right? And again, it's virtual reality stuff. You know, it adds to all of those things that Jonathan Haidt, I think, was talking about how the contrast between the virtual world and the real world. Yep. Right. Yeah, and the institutional trust, I threw up some stats from Josh Packard's study on the church, but he shows it with secular institutions as well. They've lost trust in the government and in secular institutions, and like that trust is eroding across the board with anyone in any authority, right? And I think to your point though, the conflict, like the flashpoint, almost like surge of conflict is so huge in our culture right now, right? Like that, we cancel everything, we depose everything, like it's like a visceral reaction, right? What else? What? Yeah, so social anxiety. Isn't it ironic? Like all of the tools, all of the things that we say are so great, they're actually meant to make us more connected. And we have more isolation than ever, more poverty of relationship than ever. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the financial crisis, I don't think we've even begun to see the full impact of that, right? And like, why are diocesan offices for youth ministry down 25%? That's the reason. There's just been cut after cut after cut, right? And isn't it ironic? The first positions that are always cut are for youth. Yeah, in the back. Yep. Yeah, that's huge. Lot of hopelessness. Yes. Yeah, 100% agree. And I on that bullet point of humanality, that's kind of what I'm speaking to, is the breakdown of the family, the lack of parents investing in the kinds of things that really help prepare their kids for life, right? Some of the studies that are out there right now are pretty mind-boggling. Almost every university in the country has had to hire staff that do nothing but help their incoming freshmen just be able to live. They don't know what to eat. They don't know how to do laundry. They don't know how to clean their rooms. And it literally is becoming a crisis on college campuses because they don't know how to take care of themselves. So they have full staffs of people that just go around doing human stuff that kids should have learned from their parents, right? Okay, yes.
Kind of going off of that too, I think their jam-packed schedules, they're from one event to another. It doesn't stop for them. They don't ever have time to just be kids anymore. Like I can think of, I bet you 90% of the room remembers playing outside as kids. We were told to come inside when the street lights came on, and then that was like kind of our summer was that. You just endless events like that. But these kids nowadays, they have football all day, and then when they go from football, they go to student council meeting, and then from the student council meeting, they go to this other event, and it's like it's nonstop for them.
Yeah, juvenile profession. Yeah, that's a great term. Okay, so we could go on with this. So I want to shift to the positive because we're talking about a lot of these realities, and I want to land on what I would call are the hopeful signs here, right? All of this stuff that we're talking about, and again, we could add more things to this list, but I think we have a good working start about what's the new Rocky Mountains that are in front of us. We don't have a road map. We don't have a map of the territory, but we do know some things. And we can convert some of our working supplies to help us navigate the territory in front of us. But here's the most hopeful sign of all. Everything that the secular culture is stripping away from us and from the young people that we work with are actually at the very root of what it means to be human. Does that make sense? Like the kinds of things, like deconstructionism, for example, like one of the driving philosophical threads, kind of the undercurrent of our whole modern culture, is this move of what they call deconstructionism. It wants to detach us from the old Western canon. So everything that we've known, everything that we've learned, we want to throw all of that out to free ourselves to think. Well, that goes against just the fundamental human longing for truth and for stability. How do I navigate the world in front of me if I forget everything that I've ever learned and everything that I've ever known, or the history of where I came from? You can't operate in the world like that, right? It's like pretending that you have no memory. You ever tried to live through a day with no memory? Imagine what that would be like if you can't remember what happened yesterday, what you learned yesterday. Gender identity and all of the confusion around that stuff. Like, we long to know who we are. We long to know where we came from. We long to know our identity. Like, these are fundamental human longings. We long for trust. We long for relationship and companionship. We long for harmony in the world around us. Like, these fundamental human longings are what the secular culture is stripping away. Well, guess what happens over time? People start starving for what they long for. And you'll only starve for so long before you go start looking for food. You'll find food somewhere. The hopeful sign about the situation that we're in right now is we're seeing conversions happen organically right now. And I could tell story after story. I don't have time for it this morning, but some of them are very, very public stories about people who have experienced conversion just by seeing truth and beauty and goodness happening in front of them. And they recognize the contrast that is to what's going on inside them and in the world that they've created around themselves. So this is hopeful for us. How do we root ourselves in the old so we embrace the new without succumbing to it, but we stay rooted in what we know, what I would call the enduring. There's enduring themes that we can hold on to and rest on for what we're doing. And so these would be the things I'd be interested, what would you add to this list on a more positive side, right? First of all, the impact of mentors. Study after study after study shows the impact that having mentors have in the lives of young people. Josh Packard was one of the studies that I showed before. Look at what the Springtide research is finding. Over 90% of young people that have 4 to 5 mentor-type relationships in their life are still practicing their faith as adults. I don't know, you see studies like this, and what I want to go get 4 to 5 adults into the lives of all 5 of my children. That's what I've done over the last 5, 8, 10 years. And right now, all of my kids are emerging into their adult years, engaged with their faith, practicing their faith. I know I still got some time to go to make sure that it all sticks and lasts, but my youngest just graduated from high school. So I'm a believer in this reality, the power of mentors. I think there's a fundamental reality of the compelling message of the gospel. The kerygma is a power in itself. Here's a big word for us. The incontrovertible power of truth. Truth is light. Truth is illumination. And when truth comes to bear, it does change things. The longings of the human heart. I don't know what all you would list. These are the things that these are things that kids long for. They long for truth, beauty, goodness. I think that's all captured in love, real, authentic love. They long for joy. They long for happiness. They long for friendship and relationship. They long for freedom. They long to know why they're here, what their meaning is, what their purpose is. If we start doing ministry that actually meets these longings, stuff just happens. Stuff changes. Fruit starts to emerge. The path of discipleship. This is how I kind of articulate the path. Sherry Waddell has the 5 thresholds of conversion. Trust, curiosity, openness, seeking, decision, or to the decision to become a disciple. Focus, I work part-time for Focus. They talk about the discipleship roadmap: beginning disciple, growing disciple, commissioned disciple, disciple maker, spiritual multiplier. So I've just basically taken all of those and put them in one big long trajectory. So when I'm discipling a young person, I'm actually trying to help them through the thresholds of conversion and then through the various stages of maturity as a disciple. So knowing this path, and the driving needs of young people. I think these are what I would articulate as the driving needs. They need to belong. They need to feel seen and known and heard. They need the ability to disclose themselves without shame. I think YDisciple articulates this as the need to be transparent, right? The need to be accompanied. Young people, I think more than any other time in history, young people are longing for adults to engage with them in meaningful relationships. And I don't think we've ever seen a time in history where adults are so distracted and so intimidated that they're actually not responding to the desire. And the need for grace. Young people desperately need adults who can point out faith in their life. Help them see how faith comes alive. I kind of look at it like making it accessible. How do we make faith accessible? Okay, I'm realizing that I'm running out of time, so I want to open up for you to comment here, but we got Mass in 5 minutes. Let me land on just what does this all come together like in a vision? And then hopefully we can continue to discuss these things, as in your working groups. But I would kind of lay it out like this. We have to embrace reality. I've made this comment a couple of times. We have to embrace our current reality, but without succumbing to it. I think we have to rest on, trust in, be confident in our roots, our foundations. I find so many adults are wavering on the ancient, almost apologizing for what it really means to be Catholic. Don't do that. What our roots, our foundations are what we stand on. People literally have died for it throughout our history and throughout the history of the church. Leverage what it means to be human. So when you do discipleship ministry with young people, focus on their human longings, their human needs. Know the path, that those thresholds of conversions, the steps of progression in discipleship, and get really, really good. I would say you have to know the path for yourself. I would even encourage, interrogate your own maturity as a disciple. Are you willing to look at yourself like that and ask, where am I not on track and where I should be? So know the path for yourself and then get really, really good at helping other people walk along the path. That's what discipleship looks like. Don't wait until you know everything or have everything to do it. You'll never get started if you do that. Just start doing it, right? And then focus on Jesus' way of how he did this. He witnessed to people, he invited people, he called them into imitation. Get into relationship with me and then imitate me. That obviously requires that we need to live a life that's worthy of imitating ourselves, right? And then finally, I would say let go of the unfruitful. I actually wouldn't stand up here and say, and I don't know if Annie, YDisciple, if others would disagree with this, but I wouldn't say get rid of all large group youth ministry. I think I said that a while ago, years ago when I was first advocating for discipleship stuff. I don't know if I would say that now, only because every parish is different. Every community is different. The needs of the people are different. If large group style stuff is really fruitful, then figure out the way to do that and repeat it and replicate it. Does that make sense? I think you'll find that large group stuff without the small group component, I can't imagine how it would be fruitful. A vision for discipleship, I think it's all rooted in how do we get into relationship with young people and walk with them into becoming adults. Adults that are more human, adults that are more integrated within themselves, and adults who are just actively engaged in living out their faith in the world today. Amen. I better quit right there.